After a few weeks of being in Oklahoma, we had hit the road again. This was just the beginning of what we were calling the fall foliage adventures. But of course, in true Lady Ferns fashion, we had lots of fun and unique things to explore as well. We had not even left the state of Oklahoma, and we had already hit one of the first things on my list of weird places to go to. In northern Oklahoma, there is a town called Guthrie. As it would so happen, Guthrie was actually the original capital city of Oklahoma before it moved to Oklahoma City in 1910. But that's not why we're here. We're here for something much, much stranger than that. We are here to make a stop at the burial site for a mummified outlaw named Elmer McCurdy. That comes with a story that's too wild and strange to be considered true, but yet it is. 66 years after Elmer McCurdy's death, his body was laid to rest here in a cemetery just outside of Guthrie, Oklahoma. The Summitville Cemetery has a handful of notable burials in the Boot Hill section of the cemetery, where other fallen Oklahoma outlaws were also laid to rest. One of which was William Doolin, aka Bill Doolin. Bill Doolin was born in 1858 in Johnson County, Arkansas. He was an American bandit outlaw and the founder of the Wild Bunch, sometimes known as the Doolin-Dalton Gang. This gang specialized in robbing banks, trains, and stagecoaches in Arkansas, Kansas, Indiana, and Oklahoma during the 1890s. There's a whole lot more to his story as well, but in the end, he was killed by a gunshot blast in a confrontation with a deputy U.S. Marshal, which led to him being buried here in Guthrie, Oklahoma, where we find him today. There is a grave of another man that sits between Doolin and McCurdy. It has been speculated that this man, at one time or another, was once a military veteran. It's hard to find much information on this man, which makes me even more curious as to why this guy was buried in the Boot Hill portion of the cemetery, but I guess that will remain a mystery. And that brings us to Elmer McCurdy's tombstone. His tombstone and burial site was the primary reason for our stop today. Driving through this cemetery, or even passing by this tombstone, not much may stand out to you. Maybe the boot, maybe the alcohol bottle, or other trinkets left behind. But if one were to stop and read the inscriptions on the tombstone, it would tell a slightly different story. Something just didn't add up. Elmer McCurdy was shot by a sheriff's posse in October 7, 1911 in Oklahoma. But then it goes on to say that his body was returned to Guthrie, Oklahoma from Los Angeles, California in April 1977. With almost 66 years unaccounted for, you know there's gotta be a story, and there sure is one for Elmer McCurdy. You would think death would be the end of Elmer McCurdy's journey, but it was just the beginning. Elmer McCurdy was born New Year's Day in 1880 in the state of Maine. In the early 1900s, he ended up in the Army for a short while, where Uncle Sam trained him to use nitroglycerin in demolitions, but he left before he could quite master that skill, as you will soon find out. Shortly after leaving the Army, he hooked up with some other outstanding citizens in Oklahoma and decided his plumbing, mining, and explosive experience would make him the ideal criminal. First up was his attempt at train robbery. His preferred method for explosives was to use nitro. And with his unpolished skill set, he did manage to get the safe open. However, Elmer McCurdy used too much nitro on the safe. It blew right open, and the blast was so strong that it incinerated the cash. Elmer and his buddies were able to make off with only silver coins, some of which were also melted onto the safe. Next, Elmer McCurdy decided to try his hand at robbing banks. However, he seemed to have similar results with the train robbing. Once again, he used too much nitro. He destroyed the bank's main room, but didn't even dent the safe. His string of failures could have only been topped by the train robbery on October 4, 1911. Upon learning of a train that was meant to be passing through with a large sum of money, Elmer McCurdy and his crew decided to try it one more time. The train they planned on robbing was said to have over $400,000 on it. That's over $14.5 million in today's currency. But true to form, Elmer and his buddies stopped the wrong train, and instead ended up with $46 in cash, 2 jugs of whiskey, and the conductor's watch. A newspaper account of the robbery later called it one of the smallest in the history of train robberies due to the minimal amount of money that was stolen. A couple of days later, the sheriff's posse caught up with Elmer McCurdy. Elmer was holed up in a barn, shots were exchanged, and a single bullet to the chest ended Elmer McCurdy's life. But the end of Elmer McCurdy's life was just the beginning of his story, and the events that followed over the next 66 years are even stranger than his nitro disasters. The fallen outlaw was taken to a nearby funeral home in Oklahoma. However, no one came forward to claim the body. Joseph L. Johnson, the owner and undertaker of the establishment, embalmed the body with arsenic, which was a common practice of the era to preserve the body for a long period of time. Mr. Johnson groomed Elmer, dressing him up in a suit, and then stored him in the back of the funeral home. And still, no next of kin came to claim the body. As McCurdy lay unclaimed, Johnson refused to bury or release the body until he was paid for his services. Johnson then decided to exhibit McCurdy to make money. He dressed the corpse in street clothes, placed a rifle in his hands, and stood it up in the corner of the funeral home. For a nickel, Johnson allowed visitors to see the bandit who wouldn't give up. Tales claim that Johnson charged 5 cents for a viewing, the nickel being placed within McCurdy's mouth. Supposedly, within 6 months of being embalmed, the body was capable of standing on its own. For 5 years, McCurdy was on display at the Johnson Funeral Home, where supposedly thousands came to see him. The Bandit, as he quickly became known, became a popular attraction at the funeral home and drew the attention of carnival promoters. Johnson received numerous offers to sell McCurdy's corpse, but he refused. On October 6, 1916, 5 years after Elmer McCurdy's death, a man identifying himself as Avier contacted Johnson, claiming to be Elmer McCurdy's long-lost brother from California. The man claiming to be Elmer's brother had permission from the local attorneys and sheriffs to take custody of the body and under false pretense to ship it back to San Francisco for a proper burial. When Avier showed up to claim the body, he arrived with another man calling himself Wayne, who also claimed to be the brother of McCurdy. Johnson released Elmer McCurdy's body to these men. Instead of heading for California, Elmer's body was put on a train bound for Arkansas City, Kansas. Elmer McCurdy's so-called long-lost brothers were actually James and Charles Patterson. After learning about the popular embalmed bandit exhibit, they dreamed up a strategy to take possession of the body to feature it in the Patterson's traveling carnival. McCurdy's body would then travel for another 6 years until 1922 with the Patterson's traveling carnival. And during that time, he would be featured as the outlaw who would never be captured alive. After 1922, Elmer McCurdy's body bounced from one event or circus to another, and eventually even to Hollywood. It was even briefly used as a display in the movie theaters for the 1933 film Narcotic, and made a brief appearance in the 1967 film She-Freak. His body even found its way into a tourist trap near Mount Rushmore. However, while being exhibited there, the corpse sustained some damage in a windstorm. The tips of the ears, along with the fingers and toes, were blown off. And Elmer McCurdy was once again returned to California. This time he was sent to the Pike Amusement Park on Long Beach, California. By 1976, McCurdy's corpse was hanging in the Laugh in the Dark Funhouse exhibition at the Pike. Over time, McCurdy's body had become completely mummified. And over the course of the years, the change of ownerships and location, the fact that this was originally Elmer McCurdy's body that was mummified was lost. And many who owned it and used it simply thought it was a really good Hollywood prop. Which leads us to the rediscovery of that fact on December 8th, 1976. When the production crew of the television show The $6 Million Man was filming scenes for the Carnival of Spies episode in Long Beach, California at the Pike. During the shoot, a prop man moved what he thought was a wax mannequin that was hanging from the gallows. When the mannequin's arm broke off and a human bone and muscle tissue was visible, police were called and the mummified corpse was taken to the Los Angeles coroner's office. Forensic tests were performed and clues on the body were able to positively identify that the body was Elmer McCurdy, and the preparations began to move the body back to Oklahoma. On April 22, 1977, approximately 300 people attended the graveside service at Boot Hill, finally laying Elmer McCurdy to rest. And to ensure that McCurdy's body would not be stolen, 2 feet or 60 centimeters of concrete were poured over the casket. Thank you for joining us today as we followed the adventures of Elmer McCurdy in life and after his death. Upon learning his story, we knew it was just too fascinating not to share with you all. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss out. We have so many more unique things and adventures to share with you all.